family. My name is Harry. I'm going to make them stand up because they love that. So Jonah is our oldest. He's 28. He can do anything I can do, and he's a better preacher, and I know that because Pastor always has him preach the Sunday mornings when we go home. That's Ethan. He is 26. He is a much better mechanic than I am at this point and can fix about anything. We have Gracie. She's our oldest girl. She makes my prayer letters readable. If you've read any of them, that's because of her. This is Chloe. Chloe is 20, and she is our extraordinaire at editing videos and pictures. And this is sweet Emmeline. She is the joy of our life. And you may sit down. We are sent out of, I'm sorry, this is my wife, Nikki. I make her stand. She was in a cast for 8 months with her foot because we were traveling and could not take care of it. So she is not healed completely from a broken foot, and that is mostly my fault. But we are sent out of Freedom Baptist Church in Jackson, Ohio, and we are missionaries to America. And since we're in America, who can tell me what is our official language in America? English. President Trump is working on it, but as of right now, we don't have an official language. And they've actually put it to a vote multiple times, and we do have the English language for our government. If you're going to work in government, you do have to speak English, but that's it. We don't have an official language because of the way America is. They don't want to offend anyone. But with most missionaries, they try and take a survey trip. They go to the country. They will go and they'll see the people. They'll find out the spiritual condition of the country. And since we're missionaries to America, I did that just this week. I went to Walmart. And I can tell you that we're in trouble as a nation. We moved from Massachusetts to Ohio in 2009. We drove 60,000 miles that year, made 19 round trips, and I have seen a good part of America. But I want to pose this question to you to start. Why are we sending missionaries out alone? I was watching a podcast of a pastor friend of mine, and he was asking a missionary, and he asked him that, and they had no answer. And they both agreed that they'd never really heard a good answer for that, why we're sending missionaries out alone. Well, that wasn't enough for me. I called him. I wanted to know. I said, okay, what's the answer? If you've heard an answer before, what is it? And he gave me 3 things. He said, well, first off, men are prideful. They want to be the man in charge. They don't want to be the second guy that just goes along. They want to be the one in charge. And he said the second thing is churches and boards, they don't want to send anyone out together. We sat down last night. We were talking about whether we could think of anyone that went with more than one, and the only one we came up with was a missionary we know going to Iceland, and he's taking his brother and their family, and they're all going together. And this man could only think of one time they sent a church planter to Montana, and they waited a month and prayed, and a family in the church decided to just uproot their life and go with him to help support him. But that was the only example that he could give me. And the other reason was the laborers are few. We just need to send more people. That would make more people to go and help these missionaries so that they're not alone when they're starting a church. Now, there's a map I can show you. It's called, affectionately, the Beer Belly Map of America. And what it does is it highlights, county by county, where there are more grocery stores than bars, and where there are more bars than grocery stores. Well, if you take a map of where every Baptist church is in America, and you lay those over each other, they match almost exactly. Where there is more Baptist churches, there is less bars and more grocery stores. And that all comes down to influence, right? More churches give more influence, and it highlights the need for the gospel in this dark world. Now, in Nehemiah 13, in verse 10, Nehemiah is checking on the Levites. They've been set apart to work in the temple, and when he comes to check on them, this is what he finds in verse 10. It says, "And I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, for the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled, everyone to his field. Then I contended with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken?" He saw God's man not being where he was supposed to be in that church as, why is the house of God forsaken? So they're under-supported, now they're bivocational. They had to go get a job. Now, I'm not against church planters being bivocational at all. I mean, a lot of times it's a good way to get to know the people, to get in the workforce and meet people, to spend time in that community. It's a good time to build faith. I don't have a problem with that at all, but I can tell you from starting a business, I used to work for my father, and I decided to go out on my own, and I thought, well, this will be easy. I'll just kind of start on the side and keep working for my dad. And I quickly learned that wasn't the case. I couldn't do both things. I couldn't focus on him and make my business work, and I couldn't make that business work until I focused all of my time on that business and actually walked away. Now, I can tell you that there's 2 different Baptist registries that track independent Baptist churches in America, and both of them have a number right around 10,000 churches in America. So I was talking with one of the men that did these statistics, and he was explaining to me how few people were actually reaching in America, and his assumption was that every church was reaching 10,000 people every year. And he did all these numbers with a group of 40 pastors, and they came to him, multiple people, and said, the problem is I don't know a single church that's doing that. There is not a church that I can think of that's reaching 10,000 people every year. So he lowered that number to 5,000. And if each church is reaching 5,000 people every year, we're only reaching about 15% of America. It's a very small amount that we're doing. Our church is in Jackson County. There is about 5,000 people in Jackson, and our goal is to door knock every door in Jackson every year. So that's about 5,000 people, so I would say that's right around there, but we have 70 cities in America with over 100,000 people that have no independent Baptist church. There's not a solid church in any of these cities. So keeping churches open, this is where we come in. We want to help to do that. And God put a story inside of me years ago, and I used to describe it as it was not going to be enough for me to just be a church member and sit in a pew. I knew I needed to do more. And after I got saved, we took over the jail ministry. We went there every Thursday for over 4 years. We took over the food pantry as a family, and we did all the public days as a family, passing out food. And I don't want you to think that we were handling a couple bags of groceries. When you say food pantry, people think that you're grocery shopping, but it's actually 8,000 pounds of cans. That's what we were moving. That's what food pantry is. But I was in church one day in Sunday school, and the pastor kind of leaned into the mic and he said, "Stop dreaming and do." And that kind of got my attention. I sat straight up like he was talking directly to me. And he was preaching through Romans, and he read this verse in Romans 15:27, and it says, "It hath pleased them verily, and their debtors they are. For if the Gentiles have been made partakers of their spiritual things, their duty is also to minister unto them in carnal things." This is the pattern for our ministry. This is the verse that God used to call us into ministry. And I can tell you, Pastor, I went back and watched the live stream. I didn't really get that from watching the live stream, but being there was when God talked directly to me. It wasn't the same when I went back and watched it. I wanted to go back. I thought, well, this was such a big moment for me. And it didn't really seem like anything when I watched the video. But it was like God just highlighted that verse and showed it directly to me. And when I came home, I was so excited to tell my wife that we were going to sell everything and start traveling. That will get your wife to start asking questions for sure. But this is the pattern for our ministry. It's the spiritual things and it's the carnal things. And those are the 2 things that we try and work on. Now, church planters and struggling churches, they're limited by the amount of resources they have. So with our help, they're able to accomplish more. And helping build and establish churches will reach more souls, have more influence, and it all works exactly that way. If we can have more churches, we can send more missionaries. We can have more influence. I can tell you of a church, they moved 3 times over the years, and the first time they moved, the neighborhood that they were in just fell apart. They had so many calls there that for the police that they actually came to him and they said, "We wish you hadn't moved, because without you in that neighborhood, there's been nothing but trouble there, and we're out there every night this week." And he even highlighted it by telling us that they moved yet again a second time, and it actually happened the second time in that same neighborhood. having a church in these neighborhoods is what helps show them the light of the gospel. That's what we're trying to do here. Now, I can show you a list of church planters right now that are working alone. A lot of them are bivocational, and they just don't have the manpower to get things done. And that's exactly where we come in. I mean, God is not short on land or money. I mean, He's able to provide what He needs. His laborers, He needs workers. In Matthew 9:37, it said, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. And I call our ministry doers of the work, and that comes out of James. And one of the reasons I do that is I grew up in church. I went to Christian camp. I was in a Christian school. I did all of those things. I was sat in the same pew every week. My father is still in that church today. And all of that led me to not have a love for the things of God, but instead I had a love for money. It did not lead me to true salvation whatsoever just by being in church. And in James 1:22 it says, be a doer of the word. And that's what I was missing. I was only hearing it. I wasn't actually responding to the gospel. And once I did, everything changed. But in James 1:25 it says, be a doer of the work. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's the beginning of your ministry once you get saved. That's not the end. So our first ministry goal is the spiritual needs of a church. Now, over the last 25 years, I've started 3 different businesses. And when I started working for my dad, I worked for him for a long time. And when it came time to start our own family and be out on my own, I tried to just do it part-time. And that certainly didn't work. So once I left him, I set a standard for us where I was going to promote our business every single day. That's what I wanted to do to make it succeed. So I would go out of my way. I would create mailings that I would send out. I kept a list of people that moved into our town, and I would try and contact them. If I saw people on the side of the road, I would stop and give them a card. I would try and talk to them. I would do everything I could to try and reach these people. Well, isn't reaching the lost supposed to be the same way? You're supposed to be doing exactly that. We should be trying to reach the lost every single day. Whether that is giving them a tract, whether that is going and visiting them. And I can tell you the reason I got saved after being in church all those years is we ended up in a church planter's church. And I was in his church on a Sunday night, and he was in my living room on Monday. And he just integrated himself into our life. And that's what showed me through the Bible the true love of God. And that's what led me to that true repentance and salvation, was having someone that took the time to show these things to me and to just integrate himself into our lives. Now, helping others is never easy. It always takes effort. And one of the things we like to do when we go to a church is to, every time we stay at a church, I ask him, do you go out on Saturday? Do you have an outreach? And we try and go door knocking with every one of these churches that we visit. We were just in a church in Kentucky this last fall, and the pastor had only been there 2 months, and I said, well, do you have an outreach? And he said, well, I just took over. We haven't started that. And I said, well, do you want to? And he said, well, yes. So we planned that, and he managed to get, I think there was 3 other men from the church. And what we did was we just split up into groups. Each of us took one of those men, and they'd never gone out and door knocked before. And the guy I was with, he was so scared to go out and do it, and I said, we're just going to go tell people what God has done and talk to your neighbors. And he had such a great time talking to people when I was out with him. He said, man, this is actually fun. I said, well, praise God, this is what we're trying to do. And I can tell you, we were working at a camp. We spent a week there digging with excavators, and I met a pastor there, and it turned out that he was a church planter. So I told my wife that year, I said, I'm going to pray about a 4th of July outreach. I want to find somewhere that we can do a 4th of July outreach where we can reach people. And that pastor just randomly messaged me and said, hey, I was thinking about you and praying for you. And as soon as I got that message, I said, wait a minute, where is this church? And I looked it up and found it, and it was on Fairground Road in their town. And I said, oh, wait a minute, what day is the fair in their town? and it just happened to be 4th of July. So I called him and I said, do you want to do a 4th of July outreach? Do you do something? And he said, well, normally I would, but I've been so busy, I just haven't had the time to set it up. And I said, well, what would you do if you had the manpower to do it? And he said, just give me a couple days. And by the time he got back to me, he had planned a whole event. We had a tent out front. We kept it manned all day. And we saw several people get saved that day from us out just standing on the street talking to people and walking around and passing out tracts. And so that's the type of thing that we try and do. The spiritual things are the first things that we work on. We do a lot of VBS at our church. This will be the 3rd year that Jonah has written the VBS. Everyone works together for all the skits and the lessons, and that's the one thing that our pastor would love for us to continue to come back and do at our church, so we try and do that every year. So we'll be going back to doing that. Now, the pattern in Romans 15:27 is the spiritual things and the carnal things, and you'll see that all through Scripture. Once you start seeing this pattern of these two things, it repeats over and over. So first we're helping with spiritual needs, and the second part is the physical needs. Now, I'm not sure if you remember, but Brother Danford was preaching revival down at Winchester, and his truck was in the shop, so he drove his Denali, which also broke down on the highway. I believe you went and rescued him and gave him a vehicle, and when we heard that happen, we tried to get a hold of him. I didn't have a number for him at the time. And they said, well, we're just asking for prayer for the situation. And Ethan said, well, we need to go help them. So as soon as we saw him that night, he gave us his key. And we took a trailer and went out and got his truck the next day. And Ethan actually ended up fixing it. And while Ethan was fixing it, we went and had keys printed because we found out he only had one key for his vehicle. So we managed to rescue his vehicle, and Ethan fixed a bunch of things on it. That's the type of thing that we love to do, and we end up doing over and over, is helping them with anything that they may need. As a matter of fact, when Brother Danford was called to be a pastor, he contacted me and he said, hey, I've got a whole list of things I need to do at my house for the realtor. So we grabbed the excavator and went out to his house, and we just did the whole list for him. Everything that the realtor wanted done on his house or in his yard. We brought in 22 ton of stone and redid his driveway for him. And we just tried to do everything we could to help his house sail for him so he could get the most for it. And that's not the first time we've done that. We actually went to help another missionary who was selling their house. And right when we got there, they got sick, and we couldn't help them because they didn't want us to come over and get us sick. So we were at a church that we were just staying at, and I said, well, what do you guys need? And the pastor said, well, we've been walking on pallets to get in and out of our parsonage for 5 years. Can you build a deck? And we said, yes, sir. So we got to work and we built a deck for him. And while me and Jonah were doing that, Ethan actually rebuilt the front of his truck. It doesn't take long when we show up somewhere that all of a sudden cars start showing up out back for Ethan to work on them. We went to a missions conference down in Mississippi, and he called before we got there and asked if we could come a week early so we could work on an apartment for them because they had a missionary coming off the field. And he said, you know, you can tell the Browns are here because there's a line of cars waiting to get worked on out back. And he said, I was wondering what that was until I got out there and saw that he had set up shop. But there's always something that needs to be done. All you have to do is make yourself available. Now, it's never easy helping people. And I had a neighbor, and I had to call in. My boys were young at the time, and I called him at like 10:30 at night and had him come down to the house to help. And when he got there, I just kept apologizing to him for bringing him out so late to help me move something. And he said, you know, I'm going to teach you something right now. It's never convenient when people need help. And he said, and the sooner that you understand that, the more help you're going to be to someone. And that immediately was brought to light because we went to a men's meeting, and we drove 3 hours to get home that night, and we drove, I don't remember how many miles it was, but it was a bad storm that night. And we got home, and the road had been blocked, and they had cut the trees out, and my neighbor's driveway was completely blocked. And I called him and said, you know, when you come home in the morning, he worked nights, I'll help you with your driveway. And he said, well, my wife needs to get out at 6 a.m. And it was already midnight, and my wife looked at me and she said, it's never convenient when people need help. And I said, you're right. So I had to take my suit off and put on a different kind of suit and went over and cleared his driveway for him in the middle of the night. But the sooner you learn that, the better. Now, God gave all of us gifts. In Proverbs 18:60, it says this, 18:16, a man's gift maketh room for him and bringeth him before great men. Well, we need to be using our gifts for God. And my gift has always been to figure out how to get things done. I just have a love to build anything. If you ask my wife, I'm sure she will tell you that I have a problem with trailers. I may own a couple. But I love to build anything, from houses, cars, trucks. If there's building involved, I probably want to take part in it and I want to be involved in it. And I'm currently building a bus right now that is going to become our home. And we traveled in a camper for 2 years, and that showed us that we can't travel in a camper. Because traveling is the problem, and weight becomes a major issue when you're traveling with this many people, and we can't travel with tools. I need to be able to travel with a lot of tools. Now, if there was ever a need, I would find a way to take care of it. I told a pastor one time that we were a helps ministry, and he called me back the next day and he wanted to talk to me. He said, okay, everyone wants to help. Why you? Why are you the guy? And I started telling him about I know how to weld, I've done electric, I've done plumbing, I've done carpet, I've done ceiling tiles, I've rebuilt 4 houses. The list of cars we've owned is ridiculous. And when I got done, he said to me, you know, it's almost like God's been training you your whole life to do this. And I said, well, I think so too. That's exactly what I think. We've been working on skills that I'm now using for God. Now, the whole reason behind us having this bus is to have our tool trailer. I have a bobcat, I have an excavator, we have a sawmill, we have a dump trailer. All of these things that we've used at various times to serve the Lord. And if you have an excavator, everything becomes an excavator problem. So it's amazing how many different ways you can use that if I can have it with me. And the other reason that we need this vehicle is we need to be completely self-sufficient. A lot of the church planters that we go to and help, they don't have a way for us to stay there. They don't have a building. We went to one that's meeting in a conference center. They don't own land. I can't park at their property. There's one that we're going to help in Pennsylvania. They are in a school. They don't have a place for us to park. We need to be completely self-sufficient, because having them put us up when we're there is just not something that's possible for these church planters. And we want to be able to help them and not be a burden on them. And the way to do that is to have our whole house with us. And that's why we're building the bus. Now, we went to Mississippi last year in the spring, and this pattern just kind of repeats over and over. We went to the church, and the Saturday we went out door knocking with him, and then we helped him clear out a shed. He had just come to the church and hadn't even moved in his house. All of his tubs were sitting outside in the rain, and we went and cleaned out his sheds for him and helped him move all of his things. And then we went on to a missions conference where we spent a week just painting and cleaning an apartment and rebuilding it for them. We went out to Missouri last year, and we went to a missions conference where we stayed at the pastor's house. So when all the missionaries were hanging out at the church just relaxing, the boys were actually under the hood of a truck working for days on end at the pastor's house, trying to help him with his truck that was broken down. And then we went straight from there to a church planter down in Cape Girardeau, and they're actually having their first service today. They're opening today for the first time. We went door knocking in Cape Girardeau, and the church we were staying at, his wife had made a whole list of things that needed to be fixed around their church, and we just did the whole list while we were there. And we left there, we went to a church, we were supposed to put in underground electric for them. That's what we were going there to do. And before I got there, he said, you know, I think it'd be more important if we'd finish the shower and finish the bathroom. And I said, okay, that's what we'll do. And then we got there, and by the time we got back from door knocking on Saturday, he said, you know, that roof leaks on the Sunday school building. And that became our priority. So we stripped the roof off right then and there. And after Sunday service on Monday, it was our 29th wedding anniversary. And my wife said, so do you have plans for today, something special? And I said, yeah, I've got to put a roof on. Then we're going to pastor's house for supper. So don't think that they don't suffer in any way by not being home and being away from their house and being away from everything they know, being on the road. But we helped that church put the roof back on their Sunday school building. That took us a couple days to complete that. And then on Wednesday, we went to the jail with them, got to preach in the jail again and preach to the men. And when we were out door knocking, Ethan figured out that the pastor's vehicle had actually rusted apart and was completely falling apart on the suspension. And Ethan spent the whole day in the city with them, helping them buy a new vehicle. And I preached the Wednesday night service when he was doing that. And we left that church and went right to the next church where we did the same thing. So this is what we do over and over. We try and reach people in any way we can to tell them about God. And if we're not doing that, I try and do anything I can do to free up the pastor's time so that he has more time to pastor those people, to reach his community, to get more done. We went to a meeting last summer in Arkansas, and I told my wife, for some reason, we hadn't been able to book that Sunday. And being, 12 hours from home and you have nowhere to go for an entire week, I said, I'm just going to trust that God has some reason that we haven't been able to book that. And when we were at this meeting, a pastor came up to me and he said, well, I have a brand new church plant right down the street. I'm sent out of this church. And I said, really? Maybe we can help you some way. And we went to his church and we found out that he'd actually been praying that a house ministry would come and help him. They have a red iron building, but there was nothing inside it. It was just those insulation on the walls. And we ended up spending a couple weeks there over the next month. And we framed out all the walls and helped them insulate it, put up sheetrock, did everything we could to help them to have a nice sanctuary to meet in. And God took care of all of that. He just led every step of the way. I didn't even have to think about it. And the other thing I wanted to tell you was how important these prayer cards are to missionaries. So I can tell you from running the jail ministry, when I would go meet people, I would totally forget their names. I would meet someone one week and come back in, and I was like, I have no idea what that guy's name was. And Jonah would tell me what it was. And I realized I needed to take that more serious. So what I did was I created a sign-in sheet, and I asked each man to sign their name when we got in there and what their prayer needs were. And I started taking that prayer list home and praying over it. And as soon as I started doing that, it became very real to me. It was easy to walk in and see, hello, James, how are you? How is that situation with your mom that we've been praying about? Because it became very real to me by having that. And it was so much so we actually went and got a board and put it up in the church just for the jail. And I would post those prayer requests on that board every week and kept that updated so people would understand these people have needs. And that's exactly what this prayer card is. I have a friend that we give out bookmarks, and he keeps it as his reading place in his Bible, and he loves to send me pictures of where he's reading and that he's praying for us with that. So it's very important for missionaries that you pray for these people. And we know enough missionaries at this point that we have a file folder of cards, and you just try and pull out a card or two every day and make sure you're praying for people. All right? Got a couple minutes. So what can I tell you that I didn't explain to you? Who has a question on what I do or where we come from, or what would you like to know? Yes, sir.
So I was wondering, what kind of plans do would you have like to retire? I was just sitting here thinking, how do missionaries retire?
Well, for me, I don't plan on stopping unless I can't physically do it. I will continue to travel. I'm sure I will transition to a point where I'm trying to lead younger men in how to do something instead of me actually physically doing it. We have a group of friends that are builders, and we were talking to their head guy, and he said, we don't do roofs. We're not that age anymore. And Jonah was like, hey, why are we on the roof all the time? I said, well, you're young. We can get on the roof. Everywhere we go, we end up on a roof, it seems. But I don't... Huh? We are keeping our house. At this point, we try and go home. We've been going out for 8 to 9 weeks, and then we go home and try and get any appointments that need to get done, straighten things out, pay some bills, and get back in the camper. And that's kind of worked pretty good for us to keep doing that. The further you go, the longer you have to stay out. I mean, I can go work in Ohio a day or two, no problem. But if it's in Mississippi, well, I need to plan ahead because it doesn't make sense for us. At this point in our ministry, we don't have enough support to sit still. I have to keep moving. So even if I'm working at a church, I'm probably trying to get in another church near it to present our ministry. And the goal ultimately is to try and spend 2 months for the church planner. And that's not a random number. That my pastor started our church from nothing. And after he prayed about it for a week, he came to me and he said, I think if you had given me 2 months, you would have saved me 2 years of work. And he said, so I would like you to set a goal of trying to spend 2 months with a church planner to help get that church going. So that's the ultimate goal for us, is to be able to do that, to stay there for 2 months and do what they need. Is there anything else?
And your basic, oh, go ahead, Pastor.
This previous ministry, what experience do you have prior to?
Ministry experience, or yeah. So when I got saved, we went to Brother Bankhead's church, and we were there for about 9 years, and we just did everything there. We took over the jail ministry, and we were there every Thursday, even on Thanksgiving. We still went and found a way to get there. And we taught Sunday school, we did VBS, we did any of those things. And he trained us through that church. So we were there for 9 years, I think, before we moved. But that was the total of my ministry experience. We do a lot of VBS, we do a lot of teaching Sunday school, teaching junior church at our church. I'm sorry? Oh, okay, yeah, that's what we did. We did it through a Bible Institute through the church. And we live in Greenfield, which is an hour and 40 minutes that way. Is there anything else I can explain?
So you're based out of Greenville and you travel
Greenfield.
Greenfield, and you travel to wherever the church is.
Yes.
States away.
Yep.
And so you'll haul the excavator if need be, and all the different. Okay.
I've hauled it from West Virginia to the other side of Indiana so far.
Okay.
You know, sometimes that can be a big deal to a church. We went to a tent meeting. That's actually where we met Alethea. And I brought my Bobcat, and the church had all kinds of drainage issues. So we helped put the tent up, and while we were there, they rented out at the fairgrounds, and no one had mowed that all year. So we went and pulled the church's mower out and showed up in the wee hours of the morning to mow it the day we were going to put the tent up. And then every day that the tent meeting was going on, we were outside working. We changed all the drainage at the church. We hooked up a bunch of pipes, had to cut sidewalks, brought in gravel, regraded the whole parking lot. We did that all week. And then as soon as the tent meeting was over, the evangelist, when he was leaving, both wheels fell off his trailer. And we spent the day over there and actually re-threaded the spindles on his trailer and put it all back together. And don't do that, by the way. But that's what we did to get him home. And I know that trailer has already gone all the way out to Minnesota and back, and it's still rolling. So it worked. Yes. Exactly. questions? Yes,
Did you say you're from Greenfield, Ohio,
yes.
in Highland County?
Actually, we live in Ross County.
Okay,
but
well,
it is
I'm from Leesburg.
Okay.
Small world.
Yep, we don't live too far from there. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, Pastor.
So he does have a video, and this morning we found that the projector bulb went out. So they're going to try to change that this afternoon. We're going to watch his video this evening. And well, I didn't realize that time flew fast. I was very encouraged and interested in what you were teaching and saying, so I appreciate that very much. And I had a couple of thoughts. I believe God ought to direct the ministry program of the church. I don't think that's something we ought, and I know, every church has its liberty and they do what they want to do. And I've known many pastors that their goal was to have a specific place that they're focused on or a specific area or just foreign missions or whatever. God has kind of directed in the last few years the ministry here as far as our support. And a lot of it was not voluntarily. It wasn't we were focused on doing that. But God has given us sort of a change. And I wonder if it's not because of what's going on in our country and the churches that we're losing. But we now support 14, I quickly counted them up a while ago, 14 ministries in the U.S. And some of those are to the deaf, some of those are to, different things, different areas of planting churches, in Alaska as well. But all of those 14 ministries, and we didn't start out trying to do that. One missionary I can think of off the top of my head was going to Australia, and they wouldn't let him in, so he came back and planted a church over in Missouri, and is doing well there. But what an interesting thing, and it kind of ties in too with the message that I'll be preaching this morning on the Apostle Paul and no man standing with him. And I just got to thinking, how many churches, how many Baptist pastors would lead their churches to take on and support a second man? And I think that's another issue with another person going in the same field, in the same area, and working together, is a lot of churches wouldn't want to do that. And that's a shame, because that would be a great encouragement sometimes to some of these missionaries. But we want to diversify. That's what we've been learning, diversify everything. So we don't want to send two people to the same place. You got two people, send them to different places. So we'll preach on that a little bit more in the morning service. I appreciate it, Brother Brown. That was very good. Let's pray. We'll be dismissed and get ready for the morning service. Father, we love you. Thank you again for this family and their endeavor to serve you and honor you by helping churches, by helping this country to once again reestablish ground that we have lost to the devil, that we might be able to once again be the bastion of missions around the world. Lord, it's impossible for us to send missionaries around the world when we don't have churches that are strong here in America. So I pray you bless these church planters, bless these ministries in America. We may recover some of the ground that we've lost through the years. Strengthen us, we ask. Bless us, guide and direct our path. As we know in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, it directs us to ask. Lord, please guide us, direct our path. In Jesus' name, amen.